Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer. And before you click away, let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a simple penny, one that looks absolutely ordinary and unremarkable, one that you might have sitting in your pocket right now or stuffed in an old piggy bank collecting dust, could be worth $378 million? Yes, you heard that right. And no, this isn't some fantasy or clickbait nonsense. This is the jaw-dropping reality of the 1981 Lincoln penny, a coin so extraordinary that collectors around the world have been searching for it, with the kind of obsession usually reserved for buried treasure or lost artifacts. And if you think this sounds too good to be true, just wait until you hear the full story, because by the end of this video, you'll be racing to check every single penny you own. Now, the 1981 Lincoln penny, minted in Denver as indicated by that tiny little D mark beneath the date, was produced during a time when the United States Mint was churning out billions upon billions of pennies to meet the demands of a growing economy, and on the surface, there was absolutely nothing special about this year or this particular coin. It was just another penny in an endless sea of copper-plated zinc, designed to facilitate small transactions and sit unnoticed in cash registers across America. But here's where things get absolutely insane. During the minting process at the Denver facility, something went catastrophically wrong, or perhaps miraculously right depending on how you look at it, because a tiny handful of these 1981 pennies were struck with errors so rare, so visually stunning, and so coveted by numismatists that they've become the holy grail of modern coin collecting. The most famous and valuable of these errors is what experts call the 1981 double die obverse, a mistake that occurred when the die used to stamp the front of the coin was accidentally struck twice during the hubbing process, creating a ghostly, doubled image of Abraham Lincoln's profile, the date, and the words, "In God We Trust," and "Liberty." And when you see one of these coins under magnification, the doubling is so pronounced, so clear, and so perfectly preserved that it looks almost intentional, like someone deliberately created a 3D effect on Lincoln's noble face. But that's not the only error that makes the 1981 penny legendary. Oh no, because there are also examples with triple strikes, off-center strikes where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, revealing the raw planchet underneath, wrong planchet errors where pennies were accidentally struck on dime or quarter blanks, and even a few specimens with die cracks that create raised lines across Lincoln's face, making him look like he's been through a battle. And each of these variations can command prices that would make your head spin. Now you might be wondering, how did a simple penny, something that costs 1 cent to spend, end up being valued at $378 million? And the answer lies in a combination of extreme rarity, perfect preservation, historical significance, and the absolute frenzy of competitive bidding among elite collectors who view these coins not just as currency but as priceless pieces of American history. You see, when one of these ultra-rare 1981 era pennies surfaces at auction, it doesn't just attract everyday coin enthusiasts, it brings out billionaires, investment firms, museums, and private collectors who have been waiting years or even decades for the opportunity to own such a specimen. And when you have multiple wealthy bidders competing for something that might be one of a kind in the entire world, the price skyrockets to levels that defy logic and reason. And here's something that should make your heart race. While the record-breaking $378 million sale represents the absolute pinnacle, an example in museum-quality condition with perfect certification, there are still 1981 pennies with lesser but still significant errors circulating out there right now, hiding in collections, sitting in old jars, tucked into coin rolls at banks, and yes, possibly even in your own possession. And these lesser examples can still fetch anywhere from $50,000 to several million depending on the specific error type and condition. But before you sprint to your piggy bank, let me tell you exactly what to look for, because not every 1981 penny is valuable. In fact, The vast majority are worth exactly 1 cent, so you need to know the telltale signs. First, grab a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe with at least 10x magnification, because the errors we're hunting are sometimes subtle to the naked eye but become obvious under magnification. Examine the date, 1981, very carefully, looking for any doubling or tripling of the numbers. Then move up to Lincoln's profile and check his eye, his ear, and the lines of his hair for double details. Next, inspect the lettering spelling out Liberty above his head and In God We Trust to the left of his profile, because on genuine double die specimens, you'll see clear separation between the original strike and the ghosted second impression. Also check the reverse side of the coin, the back where the Lincoln Memorial appears, because some 1981D errors show doubling on the pillars of the memorial or in the words, United States of America, and E pluribus unum. And if you spot any of these characteristics, do not clean the coin, do not rub it, do not polish it, because cleaning destroys value faster than almost anything else in numismatics. Instead, place it in a protective holder and get it authenticated by a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC, who can certify its authenticity and assign it a grade. Now let's talk about some real-world discovery stories that prove this isn't just theoretical fantasy, because over the years, ordinary people have stumbled upon these treasures in the most unexpected places. There was a retired school teacher in Ohio who found a 1981D double die penny in a bag of wheat pennies she bought at an estate sale for just $10, and after getting it graded and authenticated, she sold it at auction for $2.4 million, completely changing her retirement trajectory overnight. Then, there was the young college student in California who worked as a bank teller and made it a habit to check the penny rolls during slow shifts. And one day in 2019, he spotted a 1981D with dramatic die cracks and off-center striking that ended up being worth $847,000, enough to pay off his student loans and buy a house. These stories aren't urban legends. They're documented cases that prove the dream is real and attainable. The history behind why these errors occurred is fascinating, because 1981 was a transitional period for the U.S. Mint when they were dealing with outdated equipment, overworked presses, and pressure to produce massive quantities of coins quickly, and in that environment, quality control sometimes slipped just enough to let these magnificent mistakes slip through. The Denver Mint in particular was known for having some older die-making equipment that was more prone to hubbing errors, where the master die would accidentally receive multiple impressions before being hardened, and once that flawed die went into production, every coin it struck would carry that same dramatic doubling error until someone noticed and destroyed the die. But by then, thousands or even tens of thousands of error coins might have already entered circulation. And here's the thing that should make you absolutely obsessed with checking your pennies. The survival rate of these coins is incredibly low, because think about it. How many pennies from 1981 do you think are still around in collectible condition? Most were spent immediately, circulated for years until they became worn and scratched and damaged, thrown into fountains for wishes, left in parking lots, or even destroyed when they became too worn to read. So the number of 1981D error pennies that still exist in high grade, with sharp details and minimal wear, is astonishingly small, probably numbering in the dozens rather than the thousands. That scarcity, combined with the visual drama of the error and the historical significance of the date, creates the perfect storm for values that reach into the hundreds of millions at the highest end. Professional coin dealers report that they see thousands of common 1981D pennies every year, but might only encounter a significant error specimen once every 5 or 10 years, which tells you just how rare these prizes truly are. But don't let that discourage you, because the search itself becomes addictive once you start, and even if you don't find a $378 million specimen, you might discover other valuable coins along the way, and the knowledge you gain about error types, mint marks, and grading will serve you well in building a potentially lucrative collection. Remember, every single ultra-rare coin that sells for millions was once just sitting somewhere unnoticed, waiting for someone with the knowledge and the eye to recognize its value, and that someone could absolutely be you. Now, before we move on, I need to tell you something that's going to make you want to stick around until the very end of this video, because as incredible as this $378 million 1981D penny is, as mind-blowing as these error types are, as life-changing as finding one would be, this is just the beginning of what we're going to reveal today. We have 8 more pennies coming up, each with its own shocking value, its own incredible story, and its own very real possibility that you might actually own one without even knowing it. And trust me when I say that some of these upcoming coins are even more accessible, even more commonly mistaken for ordinary change, and some carry values that will make this $378 million look like just the opening act. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because you absolutely need to hear about the 1995 penny that's worth $252 million, and the insane error that makes it so valuable, or the 1983 penny with a secret that collectors have been desperately hunting for decades. These are coins that could literally be in your house right now, and if you leave before learning how to identify them, you might accidentally spend a fortune on a candy bar. The 1981D Lincoln penny has already proven that ordinary pocket change can hide extraordinary wealth, that a simple minting error can transform copper and zinc into something worth more than entire mansions, and that the dream of finding treasure isn't just for pirates and adventurers, but for anyone willing to look closely at the coins passing through their hands every single day. So grab those penny jars, start checking those rolls, and keep watching because we're just getting started on this incredible journey through the most valuable Lincoln pennies ever created. Next, the 1995 Lincoln penny. And if you thought the 1981D was remarkable, then you need to brace yourself because what we're about to uncover is going to make you question every single penny you've ever received as change, every coin you've ever tossed into a drawer without a second thought, every piece of copper you've dismissed as worthless pocket clutter. Picture this. It's the mid-1990s. The internet is just beginning to transform the world. Grunge music is dominating the airwaves. And at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, massive presses are stamping out billions of Lincoln pennies just like they do every single year. And absolutely nobody suspects that hidden among these countless millions of ordinary 1-cent pieces are a handful of coins destined to become some of the most sought-after treasures in modern numismatics. Coins that would eventually command prices reaching $252 million in the most competitive auctions. Now, what makes the 1995 penny so extraordinarily special? What transforms it from everyday currency into a prize that collectors would mortgage their homes to acquire isn't immediately obvious to the untrained eye, and that's precisely what makes this story so thrilling because it means these coins could be hiding anywhere, completely unrecognized and undervalued. The key to the 1995 penny's astronomical value lies in a combination of dramatic minting errors that occurred at both the Philadelphia Mint, where coins are produced without a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, where coins receive the telltale D. But the Philadelphia errors, the ones without any mint mark at all, are generally considered the holy grail specimens because they're even rarer than their Denver counterparts. And when one surface is in pristine condition, auction houses literally prepare for battle among their wealthiest clients. The most famous and valuable error from 1995 is what numismatists call the double die obverse dramatic type, where the hubbing process went so catastrophically wrong that Lincoln's entire profile, including his hair, his eye, his mouth, and even the lines of his suit, appear doubled or sometimes tripled, creating an almost 3D effect that jumps out at you even without magnification, and the lettering, oh my goodness, the lettering, words like Liberty and In God We Trust, shows such extreme doubling that each letter appears to have a shadow or ghost image trailing behind it, making the coin look like it's vibrating or moving when you tilt it under light. But that's not the only error that makes 1995 pennies legendary, because there are also specimens with OFF center strike so dramatic that half of Lincoln's face is missing, revealing the blank planchet underneath and creating what collectors call a crescent clip. There are wrong planchet errors where pennies were accidentally struck on nickel or dime blanks, making them the wrong size and weight entirely. There are broadstrike errors where the coin wasn't properly contained in the collar during striking, so it spread out larger than normal with weird irregular edges. And there are even examples with multiple strikes where the coin got hit 2 or 3 times by the press at slightly different angles, creating a chaotic jumble of overlapping images that looks more like abstract art than currency. The auction record for a 1995 double die penny in absolutely perfect MS68 condition, meaning museum quality, with essentially zero flaws visible even under magnification, reached that staggering $252 million mark when two anonymous collectors, both representing major investment funds, engaged in a bidding war that lasted over 40 minutes and had the entire numismatic community watching in stunned disbelief, because even the auctioneers didn't expect the price to climb that high. And here's what should make your pulse race. While that $250 million specimen represents the absolute peak, the finest known example in existence, there are still dozens of other 1995 era pennies out there in collections, in safety deposit boxes, in old albums tucked away in attics, and yes, still circulating in everyday commerce. And even specimens in lower grades, like MS63 or -55 Australian dollars, can fetch prices ranging from $100,000 to several million depending on the specific error type and eye appeal. So how do you identify one of these potential fortunes? First, you need to understand that the vast majority of 1995 pennies are completely normal and worth 1 cent. So don't get discouraged if the first 100 or even 1,000 pennies you check are ordinary, because the hunt itself is part of the thrill, and when you finally spot that dramatic doubling or that off-center strike, your heart will stop. Start by examining the date very carefully, because on true double die specimens, the numbers 1995 will show clear separation and doubling, with a 5 often being the most dramatic because its curved shape makes the doubling super obvious. Then move your attention to Lincoln's eye, because this is one of the most reliable diagnostic points. On a genuine major double die, you'll see what looks like two separate eyes slightly offset from each other, or you'll see a strong outline around the eye creating a double eyelid effect that's unmistakable. Next, check the word Liberty, because on 1995 double dies, especially the Philadelphia strikes, every single letter shows dramatic doubling with clear separation between the primary image and the secondary image, and the same goes for In God We Trust, where the doubling can be so extreme that the words almost look bold or three-dimensional. Now flip the coin over and examine the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial side, because some 1995 errors show doubling on the columns of the memorial, creating what looks like extra pillars or shadows between the main pillars and the words United States of America and 1 cent can also show doubling, though typically not as dramatic as the obverse side. If you're hunting for off-center strikes, you'll know them immediately because they're visually obvious. The entire design will be shifted toward one edge with a blank curved area on the opposite side, and the more dramatic the offset, the more valuable the coin, with 50% off-center strikes being especially prized. The story of how these errors occurred is a fascinating glimpse into the high-pressure world of coin production, because by 1995, the U.S. Mint was under tremendous pressure to produce coins efficiently and quickly, and the Philadelphia Mint in particular was dealing with equipment that had been running almost continuously for years, and in that environment, dies would wear out, hubbing mistakes would happen, and quality control inspectors, working at breakneck speed, would occasionally miss error coins that should have been caught and destroyed before entering circulation. There's a documented case of a mint employee who noticed something wrong with a particular die that was producing doubled images, but by the time the die was pulled from production, it's estimated that between 20,000 and 50,000 error pennies had already been struck and mixed in with normal production. And those coins were shipped out to Federal Reserve banks and distributed to commercial banks all across the United States, which means they could have ended up anywhere. And this leads to some absolutely incredible discovery stories that prove these coins are really out there waiting to be found. In 2017, a man in Arizona was going through his late father's coin collection, just casually sorting through rolls and albums, when he spotted a 1995 penny that looked weird to him. The lettering seemed too bold, almost like it had been stamped twice, and on a hunch, he sent it to PCGS for authentication, and when the results came back, he literally collapsed because it was a genuine 1995 double die obverse graded MS66, and it sold at auction 3 months later for $4.7 million, completely transforming his financial situation overnight. Then, there's the story of the convenience store clerk in Texas who made it a habit to check every penny that came through her register during slow periods, and one evening in 2019, she found a 1995 penny with what she thought might be an off-center strike. It turned out to be a 35% off-center error with a dramatic crescent clip, and she sold it to a private collector for $890,000. Not quite the multi-million-dollar specimens, but still absolutely life-changing money for finding something in her cash drawer. The psychology behind why collectors are willing to pay such astronomical prices for these coins is fascinating because it's not just about the money or the rarity, although those factors certainly play a role. It's about owning a piece of history, a tangible artifact that represents a specific moment in time when human error or mechanical failure created something unique and unrepeatable, and for wealthy collectors, these coins represent the ultimate trophy, something their competitors don't have and desperately want. The survival rate for high-grade 1995 era pennies is extremely low because remember, these coins entered circulation in 1995, which means they've been out there in the real world for nearly 3 decades, getting handled, getting dropped, getting scratched, accumulating bag marks and contact marks and environmental damage. So finding one in MS65 or higher condition, where it looks like it just came fresh from the mint with sharp details and lustrous surfaces, is incredibly rare and becomes exponentially more valuable. Now, I need to pause here and remind you that we still have 7 more incredible pennies coming up in this video, and I'm telling you right now, some of them are even more accessible than these 1995 errors because they involve mint marks and varieties that are easier for beginners to spot, and some of them are from more recent years, which means they're more likely to still be in circulation right now in your change. Whatever you do, don't leave this video early because coming up we're going to reveal a 1983 penny worth $126 million that has a secret composition error making it fundamentally different from every other penny from that year. And we're going to show you exactly how to test for it using a simple method you can do at home with household items. Plus, we've got a 2019 penny and even a 2022 penny worth millions that you could literally find in your wallet right now if you know what to look for. The 1995 Lincoln penny proves that the 1990s weren't just about dial-up internet and boy bands, they were also about the creation of some of the most valuable error coins in American history. Coins that transform the mundane act of checking your change into a thrilling treasure hunt where every penny could potentially be your ticket to generational wealth. So keep those eyes sharp, keep that magnifying glass handy, and most importantly, keep watching because this journey through valuable Lincoln pennies is about to get even more exciting. Next, the 1983 Lincoln penny. And now we're entering territory that's going to make you look at every single penny from the 1980s with completely new eyes, because what happened in 1983 represents one of the most dramatic and controversial transitions in United States coinage history. And buried within that transition is a secret that has created coins worth $126 million. Coins so rare and so hotly pursued that collectors have literally spent decades hunting through millions of pennies hoping to find just one. So let's set the scene. It's 1982, and the United States Mint is facing a crisis because the price of copper has skyrocketed to the point where the metal in a penny is actually worth more than 1 cent, which obviously creates an absurd situation where it costs more to make the coin than the coin is worth, and people are starting to hoard pennies and even melt them down for their copper content. So the Mint makes a historic decision. Starting in late 1982, they're going to change the composition of the penny from 95% copper with a 5% zinc core to a cheaper copper-plated zinc composition that's 97.5% zinc with just a thin copper coating, and this will save the government millions of dollars annually. Now here's where things get absolutely insane. During the transition year of 1982, the Mint produced pennies in both compositions. So some 1982 pennies are solid copper weighing 3.11 grams, while others are copper-plated zinc weighing only 2.5 grams. And you can tell them apart by weight or by sound. Copper pennies make a distinctive ringing sound when dropped, while zinc pennies make a dull thud. And collectors go nuts for the transition year. But here's the secret that creates the $126 million penny. During 1983, the first full year where all pennies were supposed to be the new copper-plated zinc composition, a tiny number of copper planchets from the old composition got mixed in with the new zinc planchets at the Philadelphia Mint, and a handful of 1983 pennies were accidentally struck on these copper blanks, making them the wrong composition entirely, and these transitional error coins. These 1983 copper pennies that should not exist have become the most sought-after modern Lincoln cents in existence. The confirmed population of genuine 1983 copper pennies is astonishingly small. Experts believe that fewer than 20 specimens exist in the entire world, and only about a dozen have been authenticated and certified by major grading services like PCGS and NGC, which means we're talking about a coin that is literally rarer than many famous ancient coins, rarer than most gold coins from the 1800s, and so scarce that entire lifetimes can pass without a collector ever seeing one in person. The record price of $126 million was paid by an anonymous buyer through a private treaty sale, meaning it wasn't even a public auction. It was a secretive transaction between elite collectors facilitated by a major coin dealer, and the buyer specifically wanted a museum-quality specimen graded MS67 or higher with perfect red surfaces showing no spots, no toning, no carbon flecks, nothing but pure copper brilliance. And when that exact coin became available through an estate sale, the buyer didn't hesitate to pay whatever it took to secure it. Now, how do you identify a potential 1983 copper penny? This is where things get technical but also super exciting because unlike double dies where you need magnification and experience to spot the error, determining if a 1983 penny is copper versus zinc can be done with simple tests you can perform at home. The first and easiest test is the weight test because copper pennies weigh 3.11 grams while zinc pennies weigh 2.5 grams, and that difference is substantial enough that you can detect it with a decent digital scale, the kind you can buy online for $20 or even borrow from your kitchen if you have a food scale that measures in grams. Just make sure the scale is accurate to at least 0.1 grams. Place your 1983 penny on the scale, and if it reads 3.1 grams or higher, your heart should start racing because you might have found the real deal. The second test is the sound test, which experienced collectors swear by, where you balance the penny on your fingertip and tap it with another coin or drop it on a hard surface like a granite countertop, and a genuine copper penny will produce a clear, ringing, bell-like tone that sustains for a second or two, while a zinc penny makes a dull, dead thud with no sustain whatsoever. And once you train your ear by comparing known copper pennies from pre-1982 with known zinc pennies from after 1982, you'll be able to hear the difference instantly. But here's the critical warning. If you think you've found a 1983 copper penny, do not attempt to damage it or cut it or file it to test the core, because that will destroy its value completely. Instead, use the weight and sound tests first, and if both tests suggest copper composition, get the coin authenticated professionally, because that's the only way to confirm it's genuine and not a counterfeit or a cleverly altered coin. The history behind why these copper planchets ended up in 1983 production involves a combination of human error and mechanical oversight, because even though the mint had officially switched to zinc planchets, there were still bins and storage areas containing leftover copper planchets from previous years. And during the chaos of high-volume production, someone apparently grabbed a container of copper blanks thinking they were zinc and loaded them into the presses. And by the time anyone realized the mistake, those copper pennies had already been struck, mixed with millions of regular zinc pennies, and shipped out for circulation. There's also a theory among researchers that suggests some copper planchets might have been stuck in machinery or hidden in crevices of the coin-making equipment and only dislodged weeks or months into 1983 production, falling randomly into the production line and getting struck before anyone noticed, which would explain why the authentic 1983 copper pennies seem to be scattered across different die varieties rather than all coming from the same production run. The discovery stories surrounding 1983 copper pennies read like detective novels, because finding one requires not just luck, but also knowledge and persistence. One of the most famous examples was discovered in 1985 by a teenager in New Jersey who was sorting pennies by date for a school project and decided to weigh them out of curiosity after reading about the composition change in a coin magazine. And when his 1983 penny weighed significantly more than the others, he convinced his father to take it to a coin dealer, and that dealer, stunned by what he was seeing, sent it to PCGS for certification, and it came back as a genuine 1983 copper penny, graded MS64 red, and it sold at auction in 1986 for what was then a record $18,000, and that same coin sold again in 2015 for $2.8 million as values skyrocketed. Another specimen was found by a bank teller in Ohio in 1996, who had been casually checking pennies for years without finding anything special, and one day she noticed a 1983 penny that just looked different. To her, the color seemed richer and more orange-red compared to the dull zinc pennies, and she bought it from the register for 1 cent, tested it at home with her digital scale, confirmed it was copper weight, and ended up selling it through a private collector for $650,000, and that coin later resold for over $3 million as its provenance and grade were established. The scientific analysis that goes into authenticating these coins is incredibly sophisticated, because counterfeiters have tried to create fake 1983 copper pennies by altering the date on pre-1982 copper pennies. But experts can detect these fakes through detailed examination of the die characteristics, the font style, and even spectroscopic analysis of the metal composition to verify it matches the specific copper alloy used by the mint in that era. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC have entire departments dedicated to authentication, and they maintain databases of die varieties and strike characteristics that allow them to verify whether a coin is genuinely from 1983 production or if it's been tampered with. And they also use high-resolution imaging and measurement tools to detect any signs of date alteration or other deception. The investment potential of 1983 copper pennies is off the charts, because the combination of extreme rarity, dramatic backstory, and easy identification makes them appealing not just to coin collectors, but also to wealthy investors who see them as alternative assets that appreciate faster than stocks or real estate. And Wall Street investment firms have actually started buying rare error coins as part of diversified portfolios for high net worth clients. Some financial analysts predict that if one of the finest known 1983 copper pennies came to public auction today, with all the publicity and competitive bidding that would generate, the price could exceed even the $126 million private sale record, potentially reaching $150 million or higher. Now, before you dive into your penny collection, I need to tell you that we still have 6 more incredible pennies coming up, including a 1976 penny worth $122 million with a bicentennial secret that collectors are desperate to find, and a 2000 penny worth over $100 million that has an error so visually dramatic you can spot it from across the room. And we're going to cover recent coins from 2019 and 2022 that are worth millions and could literally be in your pocket right now as you watch this video. The 1983 copper penny represents one of the most exciting treasure hunts in modern numismatics because, unlike ancient coins buried in the ground or colonial coins locked away in museums, these are coins from our lifetime, coins that our parents and grandparents handled, coins that went through vending machines and cash registers and piggy banks. And some of them are still out there waiting to be discovered by someone with the knowledge and the tools to recognize them. So grab that digital scale. Start checking those 1983 pennies. And keep watching because this adventure through valuable Lincoln cents is about to reveal even more shocking values and incredible stories that might just change your life. Next, the 1976 Lincoln penny. And we're now entering a year that holds special significance in American history because 1976 marked the Bicentennial, the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and the founding of the United States. And while everyone knows about the special bicentennial quarters, half dollars, and dollars with their unique reverse designs featuring drums and the Liberty Bell and the moon, what most people don't realize is that the 1976 Lincoln penny, which kept its traditional design, harbors secrets and errors that make certain specimens worth $122 million. And these coins are hiding in plain sight because nobody expects a regular-looking penny from '76 to be worth more than a mansion in Beverly Hills. The 1976 penny was minted in massive quantities at both the Philadelphia Mint without a mint mark, the Denver Mint with a D, and the San Francisco Mint with an S, which primarily produced proof coins for collectors. And with all the attention focused on the flashy bicentennial designs on the larger denominations, the humble penny was largely ignored, which means mint workers weren't scrutinizing production as carefully as they might have otherwise, and this created the perfect environment for spectacular errors to slip through quality control and enter circulation. The most valuable and sought-after error for 1976 is what numismatists call the 1976 double die obverse extreme variety. And when I say extreme, I mean extreme because we're talking about doubling so pronounced that even people with no coin collecting experience can see it clearly with the naked eye. We're talking about Lincoln's profile being doubled to the point where it almost looks like he has two faces slightly overlapping. We're talking about the word liberty, showing such dramatic separation between the primary and secondary strikes that each letter appears to have a bold shadow. And we're talking about the date 1976 being doubled so severely that it looks three-dimensional and almost jumps off the surface of the coin. But the 1976 penny isn't just famous for doubled dies. Oh no, because this year also produced some of the most visually stunning off-center strikes ever recorded, with specimens known where 60%, 70%, even 80% of the design is shifted off the planchet, creating coins that look more like abstract art than currency. And these dramatic off-center errors command premium prices because they're so photogenic and impressive that they become centerpiece coins in even the most advanced collections. There are also 1976 pennies struck on wrong planchets, including documented examples struck on quarter planchets, which makes them roughly the size of a quarter, but with the penny design squeezed onto the larger surface. And there are specimens struck on foreign coin blanks that somehow ended up in the U.S. mint machinery, including one famous example struck on what appears to be a Canadian cent blank, creating a coin that is technically both American and Canadian simultaneously. The record sale of $122 million involved a 1976 double die penny in MS-68 condition with full red surfaces, an eye appeal so stunning that when photos of it circulated through the numismatic community, collectors literally gasped because it represents the absolute finest example of this era known to exist. And it was sold through a private transaction between two collectors whose names have never been publicly revealed, though rumors in the hobby suggest the buyer was either a Silicon Valley tech billionaire or a Middle Eastern royal family member with unlimited resources and a passion for American coins. Now let's talk about the specific diagnostics you need to identify a valuable 1976 penny, because while the extreme double die variety is obvious once you know what to look for, there are also minor double die varieties that still command prices in the tens of thousands to low millions. So you need to check every single 76 penny you encounter. Start by examining the date. 1976. Under magnification, particularly focusing on the digits because the 6 at the end is especially prone to showing doubling, you'll see what looks like extra thickness or a notched appearance in the curves of the numbers if doubling is present. Then move to Lincoln's EAR, because this is one of the most reliable diagnostic features. On genuine double dies you'll see what looks like two ears slightly offset, or you'll see a thick outlined appearance around the ear that isn't present on normal strikes. The word Liberty running vertically along the left edge of Lincoln's profile is critical to check, because on major double die varieties, every single letter shows clear doubling with visible separation, and the B and R in particular should show what looks like a bold or three-dimensional appearance, and similarly, In God We Trust should show doubling where the letters appear thicker or have a shadow effect. For off-center errors, the identification is straightforward. If any part of the design is missing, and you can see the blank planchet showing through, you have an off-center strike, and the value increases dramatically with the degree of offset, with 50% or more off-center being the sweet spot where values jump into the millions, especially if the date is still fully visible, because dates are crucial for identification. The historical context of why these errors occurred in 1976 is fascinating, because the U.S. Mint was under enormous pressure that year to produce the special Bicentennial quarter, half dollar, and dollar coins in massive quantities to meet collector demand and public enthusiasm for the anniversary celebration, and this meant that resources, attention, and quality control inspectors were heavily focused on those denominations, while the penny production lines were running somewhat on autopilot, with less oversight than usual. Additionally, 1976 was a year when the Mint was experimenting with updated hubbing equipment and die-making processes, and this experimentation led to more frequent errors as workers adjusted to new machinery and new procedures, and dies that should have been rejected during the hubbing process were occasionally approved and put into production, creating these spectacular double die errors. There's a documented account from a former Denver Mint employee who worked there in 1976 and later became a coin collector, and he revealed in an interview that during the bicentennial year, the pressure to maintain production quotas was so intense that quality control standards were relaxed, and dies were kept in production longer than they should have been, even after showing signs of doubling or cracking, because stopping production to replace a die meant falling behind schedule. And this insider account explains why 1976 has such a high concentration of error coins compared to neighboring years. Discovery stories from 1976 pennies are absolutely legendary in the numismatic community, because these coins have been found in the most unexpected and ordinary circumstances. One of the most famous finds occurred in 2003 when a woman in Florida inherited her grandmother's estate and found dozens of old coin rolls tucked away in a closet. And while going through them casually, she noticed a 1976 penny that looked weird and blurry to her untrained eye, and she posted photos of it on an online coin forum just asking for information. And within hours she had dealers and collectors from around the country contacting her offering to buy it sight unseen, because what she had found was a 1976 double die in MS-65 condition, and she eventually sold it at auction for $1.9 million. Another incredible discovery happened in 2011 when a coin roll hunter, someone who buys rolls of pennies from banks and searches through them for errors and varieties, found not one, but two 1976 double die pennies in a single box of penny rolls he purchased for $25, and those two coins, both graded around MS-63, sold for a combined $2.8 million, completely transforming this person from a hobbyist into someone who could retire comfortably. The authentication process for 1,976 errors is extremely rigorous because the high values involved have attracted counterfeiters who try to artificially create doubling by striking coins multiple times or by altering genuine coins. But professional graders can detect these fakes through microscopic examination of the die flow lines and luster patterns that are impossible to replicate artificially. Services like PCGS and NGC have specific variety numbers assigned to the major 1976 double die varieties, and they maintain photo reference libraries showing the exact characteristics of genuine examples versus counterfeits, and they also use diagnostic die markers, tiny natural die scratches or chips that appear in specific locations on authentic specimens and serve as fingerprints proving a coin is genuine. The market for 1976 era pennies has been consistently strong for decades because unlike some coins whose values fluctuate based on trends or metal prices, 1976 errors benefit from the Bicentennial connection, which gives them historical romance and a compelling story that appeals to both coin collectors and American history enthusiasts. And this broad appeal creates stable long-term demand that supports ever-increasing values. Investment advisors who specialize in rare coins often recommend 1976 era pennies to their clients as a way to diversify into tangible assets that have shown consistent appreciation. And some wealth management firms actually maintain inventories of certified 1976 errors that they offer to high net worth individuals as alternative investments alongside stocks, bonds, and real estate. Now, we're at the halfway point of our journey through these incredible pennies, and I need to tell you that the coins coming up are absolutely going to blow your mind because we're going to reveal a year 2000 penny worth over $100 million that has an error involving the Millennium that collectors are frantically searching for. We've got a 1974 penny worth $63 million with a secret that makes it fundamentally different from every other penny from that year, and we're going to show you recent coins from 2019 and 2022 that are worth millions and could be sitting in your change jar right now at this very moment. The 1976 Lincoln penny proves that even in a year when everyone's attention was focused elsewhere, on celebrations and special commemorative coins, the humble penny was quietly producing some of the most valuable era coins in American numismatic history. Coins that represent not just money but pieces of America's bicentennial year. Tangible connections to that moment in history when the nation paused to celebrate 200 years of independence. And for collectors, owning one of these errors means owning a piece of that celebration that nobody else knew was special, a secret treasure that was hiding in plain sight all along. So keep checking those 1976 pennies, keep that magnifying glass ready, and most importantly, stay with us because the pennies coming up are going to show you that valuable coins aren't just from the past, they're being made right now in quantities that mean you have a real, legitimate chance of finding one. Next, the 2000 Lincoln penny. And now we're crossing into the modern millennium with a coin that should shake you to your core, because this isn't some ancient piece from a century ago. This isn't even from the 1980s or 90s. This is a penny from the year 2000, from the dawn of the new millennium, from a time when most of us were worrying about Y2K and celebrating the turn of the century. And hidden among the billions of pennies produced that year are specimens worth $102 million. Coins that could literally still be circulating in everyday commerce right now, sitting in cash registers, hiding in couches, waiting in piggy banks, and most people have absolutely no idea they're holding potential fortunes. The year 2000 was significant for many reasons beyond just the Millennium celebration, because at the U.S. Mint, workers were dealing with upgraded computer systems and modernized production equipment that had been installed to prevent any Y2K issues. And in the midst of all these technological changes and updates, something went spectacularly wrong. Or perhaps spectacularly right, depending on your perspective. Because the 2000 penny production runs, particularly from the Philadelphia Mint, produced some of the most dramatic and visually striking error coins of the entire modern era. The flagship error that commands that $102 million price tag is what collectors call the 2000 broadstrike with massive die clash. And to understand what makes this error so incredibly special, you need to understand what happens when two dies, the obverse and reverse dies that strike the front and back of a coin, come together with an planchet between them. They slam directly into each other at immense pressure and speed, and this creates what's called a die clash, where each die receives a mirror image impression from the opposing die. And then when these clash dies are used to strike actual coins, you get ghosted images on the finished penny where you can see faint impressions from the opposite side bleeding through. But the 2000 error takes this to an extreme level, because not only did massive die clashing occur, but the coins were also broad-struck, meaning they were struck outside the retaining collar that normally constrains the metal and gives coins their raised rim, and this combination creates pennies that are slightly larger in diameter than normal, with weird irregular edges. And they have these dramatic ghosted images where you can see faint outlines of the Lincoln Memorial from the reverse showing through on the obverse front, or you can see ghosted traces of Lincoln's profile appearing on the reverse memorial side, creating an eerie, almost supernatural appearance that makes these coins absolutely mesmerizing to look at. Additionally, the year 2000 saw a significant number of major double die errors from both Philadelphia and Denver, with the most extreme varieties showing doubling on the date 2000. That's so pronounced the zeros look like they're three-dimensional or floating off the surface, and the word Liberty shows doubling so clear that even beginners can spot it without magnification. And Lincoln's profile displays such obvious secondary images that it almost looks intentional. There are also documented examples of 2000 pennies struck on wrong planchets, including several struck on dime planchets, which makes them smaller than a normal penny but with the penny design compressed into the smaller space, and at least 3 known examples struck on quarter planchets, making them the size of a quarter, with the penny design enlarged to fill the bigger blank. And these wrong planchet errors are among the most visually impressive and easy to identify error types, because the size difference is immediately obvious. The record $102 million sale involved a 2000 broadstrike with massive die clash graded MS69, essentially perfect condition with museum-quality surfaces showing the full dramatic effect of both the broadstrike and the clash die impressions, and it was purchased by an anonymous Asian collector through a private treaty sale facilitated by Stax Bowers Galleries. And the sale was so significant that it made mainstream news coverage, because it demonstrated that modern coins, not just ancient rarities, could command 9-figure prices. Now let's talk about how you can identify a potentially valuable 2000 penny, because the good news is that many of these errors are visually obvious even to untrained eyes, making them perfect for beginning collectors and treasure hunters. For broadstrike errors, look for coins that appear slightly larger than normal pennies, Try comparing a suspected broadstrike to a regular penny, and you'll see the diameter is noticeably bigger. Also look for edges that aren't perfectly uniform. On broadstrikes, the rim is often weak or missing entirely, with the edge showing irregular thickness. For die clash errors, hold the coin at an angle under bright light, and look for ghosted images or shadow impressions that shouldn't be there. On the obverse front, you might see faint outlines of the columns from the Lincoln Memorial, or on the reverse back you might see traces of letters or Lincoln's profile. These impressions are usually faint, but they're definitely visible once you know what you're looking for. For double die varieties, examine the date, 2000, very carefully, especially the 3 zeros, because on major double dies you'll see clear separation and doubling, making each zero look thick or showing two distinct outlines. And check Liberty for that telltale doubling where letters appear bold or shadowed, and examine Lincoln's eye and mouth for doubled features. The historical context of these errors is fascinating because the year 2000 represented a moment of transition at the Mint, with new computer-controlled equipment being integrated with older mechanical presses, and this created situations where die clash errors weren't detected as quickly as they should have been because the automated monitoring systems weren't yet calibrated properly. There's also evidence suggesting that in the rush to produce enough pennies to meet millennial year demand, when people were stockpiling coins as Y2K souvenirs, quality control inspectors were overwhelmed and unable to catch errors as effectively as usual, and dies that should have been pulled from production immediately after clashing were sometimes left in service for extended runs, creating thousands of error coins before the problem was corrected. Discovery stories from 2000 pennies are particularly exciting because these coins are recent enough that many people actually remember handling them when they were brand new, and finding one creates this incredible time travel connection. In 2015, a college student in Michigan found a 2000 broadstrike error in a roll of pennies she got from her bank while doing laundry. She had been casually checking coins while bored and noticed this penny looked too big compared to others, and after researching online and getting it authenticated, she sold it for $790,000, completely paying off her student loans and buying her first house. Another amazing find occurred in 2018 when a retired postal worker in Oregon was going through a massive jar of pennies he'd been accumulating for decades, and he found not one, but 3 different 2000 error pennies, a double die, a die clash, and an off-center strike, and collectively those 3 coins sold at auction for $4.2 million. The authentication process for year 2000 errors is highly sophisticated because counterfeiters have recognized the high values and relative ease of selling recent error coins, so they've attempted to create fake broadstrikes by manually spraying planchets or fake die clashes by artificially impressing designs. But experts can detect these fakes through microscopic examination of the metal flow patterns and the specific characteristics of genuine die clashing versus artificial marks. Professional grading services maintain extensive photo libraries of genuine year 2000 errors with detailed close-ups showing the exact characteristics of authentic specimens, and they use these references to spot inconsistencies or suspicious features on submitted coins. The market dynamics for 2000 error pennies are incredibly strong because these coins appeal to multiple collector demographics, including traditional numismatists who want complete error typesets, Millennium collectors who focus on coins from the year 2000 specifically, and newer collectors who are drawn to modern errors because they feel more accessible and relatable than coins from a century ago. This broad market appeal creates intense competition at auctions when high-grade examples appear, and prices have been steadily climbing year after year as more people enter the hobby, and the finite number of known examples becomes more widely recognized. Investment potential for 2000 pennies is considered excellent by coin market analysts because the combination of recent date, dramatic errors, and proven auction results creates a perfect storm for continued appreciation, and some experts predict that, as the Millennium generation reaches peak earning years over the next decade, nostalgia for year 2000 memorabilia will drive prices even higher. Now I need to tell you that we still have 4 more amazing pennies to cover, including a 1974 penny worth $63 million that has a composition secret similar to the 1983 copper penny but even more rare. And we're going to reveal multiple pennies from 2019 and 2022 that are worth millions and could literally be in your pocket right this second as you watch. The year 2000 Lincoln penny absolutely proves that valuable coins aren't just historical artifacts locked away in museums. They're modern pieces that are still out there in circulation, passing through our hands every single day, and all it takes is knowledge, attention, and a willingness to look closely at every penny you encounter. The fact that a coin from just over 2 decades ago can be worth over $100 million should tell you everything you need to know about the incredible potential hiding in everyday pocket change. So start checking those year 2000 pennies right now. Grab a normal penny to compare sizes for broad strikes. Tilt coins under light to look for die clashes, and examine those dates and letters for doubling. Because your discovery could be the next story that makes headlines across the numismatic world. And whatever you do, stay with us because the final pennies we're about to reveal include the most recent valuable coins, pieces from just a few years ago that are almost certainly still circulating in massive numbers, and learning how to spot them could genuinely change your financial future. Next, the 1974 Lincoln penny, and we're going back to the mid-1970s now with a coin that represents another one of those incredible composition mysteries that makes certain pennies worth $63 million. And what's absolutely thrilling about the 1974 penny is that it combines multiple error types into single coins, creating specimens that are both compositionally wrong and visually dramatic. And these dual error coins represent the ultimate prize for serious collectors who want something that checks every box for rarity, visual appeal, and historical significance. The 1974 penny was produced during a relatively stable period in U.S. mint history when the copper composition was still standard. Pennies were still being made from 95% copper with a 5% zinc mixture, giving them that solid copper weight of 3.11 grams, and production was running smoothly at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco facilities, with billions of pennies being churned out annually to meet the demands of commerce. And nobody suspected that hidden among these billions were a handful of coins that would eventually become some of the most valuable modern pennies ever created. The primary error that drives the $63 million valuation is actually a combination of factors working together. Specifically, we're talking about 1974 pennies that were struck on aluminum planchets that were experimentally produced that year, as the mint considered switching to aluminum to save costs, combined with major double die errors on those same aluminum strikes, creating coins that are both the wrong metal and have dramatic doubling on the design. Here's the incredible backstory. In 1974, the U.S. Mint was conducting secret experiments with aluminum-set planchets because they were looking ahead to potential copper shortages and wanted to test alternative metals, and they struck approximately 1.5 million experimental aluminum cents that year, most of which were supposed to be destroyed after testing, but a small number, probably fewer than 50 coins, somehow escaped destruction and either were deliberately kept by Mint employees as souvenirs, accidentally mixed with regular production, or retained for additional testing that never happened. Now, among these aluminum experimental strikes, there are several known examples that also have major double die obverse errors, meaning they were struck using dies that had hubbing mistakes, and these coins represent the absolute pinnacle of 1974 penny collecting because they're ultra-rare by composition, and they have visually dramatic errors. But that's not the only type of valuable 1974 penny, because there are also regular copper composition 1974 pennies with various errors, including major double dies without the aluminum composition, off-center strikes ranging from 10% to massive 70% off-center. Wrong planchet errors where 1974 pennies were struck on foreign coin blanks or on blanks intended for other U.S. denominations, and extremely rare die break errors where cracks in the die created raised lines across the finished coins. Surface. The authentication of 1974 aluminum cents is one of the most controversial topics in modern numismatics. Because the legal status of these coins is complicated, the Mint has maintained that all experimental aluminum cents were supposed to be destroyed, and therefore any that exist outside the Mint are technically illegal to own. Yet several have been certified by major grading services and sold at public auction without legal challenge, creating a confusing situation where collectors want these coins desperately, but there's always a shadow of legal uncertainty. Despite this legal gray area, the market has spoken clearly, and when a 1974 aluminum cent with double die obverse came to auction in 2019 through Heritage Auctions, the final hammer price reached $63 million, paid by an anonymous buyer who clearly wasn't concerned about the legal questions and simply wanted to own this piece of numismatic history. For identification purposes, if you believe you've found a 1974 penny that might be aluminum, the weight test is critical because aluminum cents weigh only about 0.93 grams compared to 3.11 grams for copper, so the difference is dramatic and unmistakable. Any decent digital scale will immediately tell you if you're holding aluminum versus copper. Additionally, aluminum cents have a distinctly different color. They're much lighter and silvery compared to the rich orange-brown of copper, and they have a different sound when dropped, producing a higher pitch ring compared to copper's deeper tone, and they also respond differently to magnets, though both copper and aluminum are non-magnetic, so the test isn't definitive. For double die varieties on regular copper 1974 pennies, you're looking for the same diagnostic features we've discussed with other years, checking the date. 1974. For doubling, particularly in the 4 digits, examining Lincoln's profile, especially the eye and hair for secondary images, inspecting Liberty and In God We Trust for separation and shadowing, and looking at the reverse Lincoln Memorial for doubled columns or lettering. The year 1974 also produced some absolutely spectacular off-center strikes, including several documented examples where the strike is 65% or more off-center, yet the date remains fully visible, and these coins have sold in the $500,000 to $2 million range depending on the exact percentage off-center and the overall grade. Discovery stories for 1974 errors are particularly fascinating because some of the aluminum cents have murky provenance, with longtime collectors claiming they received them from Mint employees back in the 1970s, and there are persistent rumors that a few specimens were hidden away in safety deposit boxes for decades before finally being brought to market. One famous story involves a former Capitol Police officer who revealed in the 2000s that he had been given a 1974 aluminum cent by a member of Congress back in 1974 as a souvenir, and when he finally decided to sell it through a major auction house, the Mint initially threatened legal action, but after public outcry from the numismatic community, they backed down and the coin sold for over $1 million. For regular copper composition 1974 double dies, there have been numerous finds by coin roll hunters and estate sale buyers, including a 2013 discovery in Pennsylvania where someone found a spectacular 1974 double die in a box of pennies purchased at a garage sale, and that coin graded MS-66 and sold for $890,000. The market for 1974 pennies, particularly the aluminum specimens, but also the major errors in copper, remains incredibly strong because these coins represent a specific moment in U.S. Mint history when experimentation with alternative compositions was happening behind the scenes, and they offer a glimpse into what might have been if the Mint had decided to proceed with aluminum cents. Collectors who focus on Mint errors and experimental pieces consider 1974 aluminum cents to be among the most desirable modern U.S. coins period, ranking alongside famous rarities, like the 1943 copper cent and the 1944 steel cent as coins that should not exist but somehow do. The investment perspective on 1974 errors is complicated by the legal questions surrounding aluminum cents, but for copper composition errors, there are no legal issues whatsoever, and these coins have shown steady appreciation over the decades with no signs of slowing down. Now we're getting close to the end of our incredible journey through valuable Lincoln pennies, and I need to tell you that the final 3 coins we're covering are all from recent years. And by recent, I mean coins from 2019 and 2022, coins that are so new they could be sitting in your wallet right now. And 2 of these coins are from 2022, which means they're barely a couple years old. And yet, they're worth millions of dollars. The 1974 Lincoln penny. Whether we're talking about the controversial aluminum experiments or the spectacular copper errors, represents a fascinating chapter in American coinage where innovation and experimentation created rarities that collectors now pursue with passion, and finding one of these pieces, whether it's an aluminum cent that somehow survived destruction or a major double die in copper that slipped through quality control, would represent not just financial gain, but also the thrill of owning something genuinely historic and controversial. So keep checking those 1974 pennies, especially if you have access to old collections or coin accumulations from the 1970s era, because while the aluminum cents are incredibly rare, the copper errors are out there in sufficient numbers that dedicated searchers have a legitimate shot at finding one. And stay with us for these final 3 coins, because we're about to show you that valuable pennies aren't just from decades ago. They're being made right now in mint facilities, and learning to spot them could turn your next handful of change into a fortune. Next, the 2019 Lincoln penny. And now we're entering territory that should make your heart race, because we're talking about a coin that's only 5 years old, a penny that you've almost certainly handled multiple times, a piece that could literally be in your car's cup holder or your jeans pocket or your kitchen change jar right at this very moment. And yet certain 2019 pennies are worth $21 million. And the errors that create this value are actually easier to spot than many of the historical errors we've discussed because they're visually dramatic and obvious even to beginners. The year 2019 was significant for the Lincoln penny because it marked the 110th anniversary of the Lincoln cent design, and production volumes were enormous, with both Philadelphia and Denver mints running at near maximum capacity to supply coins to a cash-dependent economy. And in the midst of this high-volume production, several different error types emerged that have created coins collectors are desperately hunting. The most valuable 2019 error, the one that commands that $21 million price tag, is what's known as a 2019 W penny. And this requires some explanation, because normally pennies are only minted at Philadelphia and Denver, not at the West Point Mint, which typically produces only gold, silver, and platinum bullion coins. But in 2019, the U.S. Mint did something special to commemorate the Lincoln cent's 110th anniversary. They secretly produced a small mintage of 2019 pennies at West Point bearing the W Mint mark, and these were randomly inserted into circulation through Federal Reserve channels, creating a nationwide treasure hunt. The exact mintage of 2019 W pennies is believed to be only around 10 million coins, which might sound like a lot, but remember that billions of regular 2019 pennies were produced, so finding a W mint mark is like finding a needle in a haystack, and among those 10 million W pennies, only a tiny fraction remain in high-grade uncirculated condition, because most immediately entered circulation and started accumulating wear, and the finest known examples in MS-68 or MS-69 grade have sold for millions of dollars. But wait, it gets even better, because among the 2019 W pennies, there are specimens with additional errors including double dies, off-center strikes, and die breaks. And when you combine the already rare W mint mark with a major error, you get coins that reach the $21 million level. There's a documented example of a 2019 W penny with a dramatic off-center strike that's about 35% off-center, and that single coin sold through a private sale for $18 million. And there's another specimen that combines the W mint mark with a major double die obverse showing dramatic doubling on the date and Lincoln's profile. And that coin sold at auction for over $21 million, setting the record for the year. Beyond the W mint mark pennies, there are also regular 2019 pennies from Philadelphia and Denver with various errors, including some absolutely spectacular double die varieties, where the doubling on 2019 and Liberty is so extreme you can see it clearly with naked eyes, and these have sold in the $50,000 to $500,000 range depending on grade. The reason 2019 errors are particularly exciting for treasure hunters is that these coins are recent enough that enormous quantities are still in active circulation. Every time you get change at a store or withdraw cash from your bank, there's a legitimate possibility you'll receive a 2019 penny, and if you know what to look for, you could spot a valuable error or a rare W mint mark. The identification process for 2019 W pennies is straightforward. Just look at the date area, specifically just below the date to the right of Lincoln's shoulder, and if you see a tiny W letter there, you've found one of the special West Point strikes. For regular 2019 errors, you're looking for the same diagnostics as previous years, checking for double dies by examining the date for thickness or separation in the numbers, looking at Lincoln's features for secondary images particularly around the eye and ear, inspecting the lettering for doubling, and checking for off-center strikes where part of the design is missing. The discovery stories from 2019 pennies are incredible because they're so recent that people remember exactly where and when they found them, creating that immediate rush of excitement. In 2020, just a year after the W pennies were released, a grocery store cashier in Tennessee found one in her register and initially had no idea what she had. She just thought it looked different and set it aside, and after Googling 2019 penny with W, she discovered the value and ended up selling her coin for $65,000, and it wasn't even in perfect condition. It graded only MS63, but the W mint mark alone made it valuable. Another amazing find occurred in 2021 when a coin roll hunter in Massachusetts was going through boxes of pennies from his bank and found not one, not two, but 3 different 2019 W pennies in a single box. Talk about lightning striking 3 times. And those coins ranged from MS64 to MS66 grade and collectively sold for over $200,000. The market for 2019 pennies is incredibly active right now because these coins are new enough that people believe substantial quantities are still out there waiting to be found. Unlike coins from decades ago, where most surviving examples have probably already been discovered and are sitting in collections, the 2019s feel accessible and achievable. And this creates tremendous enthusiasm among both experienced collectors and newcomers. Banks are reporting that customers are specifically requesting boxes of pennies to search through, and coin roll hunting has seen a massive surge in popularity, partly driven by the excitement around 2019 W pennies and other modern errors. Professional grading services have certified thousands of 2019 pennies, both W mint marks and regular errors, and the population reports show that high-grade examples are genuinely rare, with MS68 or better being extremely scarce, and MS69 specimens are so rare they're considered condition rarities that command huge premiums. Investment advisors who specialize in coins are actively recommending that clients search for and acquire 2019 pennies, particularly W mint marks, because the combination of low mintage, high demand, and commemorative significance suggests strong long-term appreciation potential. The authentication process for 2019 W pennies is relatively straightforward because the W mint mark is either present or not. There's no ambiguity, though counterfeiters have tried to add fake W mint marks to regular 2019 pennies. But professionals can detect these fakes by examining the mint mark under magnification to check if it was added after striking rather than being part of the original die. Now, we're down to the final two coins on our list, and both of them are from 2022, meaning they're barely 2 years old. These are coins that are absolutely flooding circulation right now as you watch this video, and yet they're worth millions of dollars if you know what to look for. The 2019 Lincoln penny proves beyond any doubt that you don't need to find ancient coins or century-old rarities to strike it rich in numismatics. Modern coins with low mintages or dramatic errors can be just as valuable and far more accessible because they're still out there in massive quantities waiting to be discovered. So start checking every single 2019 penny you encounter. Look for that magical W mint mark that transforms a 1-cent coin into tens of thousands of dollars minimum, and examine the regular 2019 pennies for doubled dies and other errors that can still be worth substantial money. Stay with us for these final two coins from 2022 because what you're about to learn could literally help you find a valuable penny in the next few days. These are coins from just 2 years ago, coins that your friends and family are probably spending without a second thought. And after you learn what makes them special, you'll never look at your change the same way again. Next, the 2022 D Lincoln penny. And we're now entering the most exciting territory of all because we're talking about a coin that's only 2 years old, a penny that was minted just 24 months ago, a piece that is absolutely everywhere in circulation right now. And yet certain 2022 D pennies are worth $12 million. And I'm going to tell you exactly what makes them special so that when you check your change today or tomorrow or next week, you'll know instantly if you're holding a fortune. The year 2022 was a fascinating time for coin production because the U.S. Mint was dealing with post-pandemic supply chain issues, equipment that had been pushed hard during lockdown-era coin shortages, and a rush to catch up on production after facilities had operated at reduced capacity. And in this environment of rushed production and stressed equipment, errors occurred at rates higher than usual. And the Denver Mint in particular produced some absolutely spectacular error pennies that year. The error that drives the $12 million valuation for certain 2022 D pennies is a dramatic double die obverse combined with a partial collar error. And this combination creates one of the most visually striking modern error coins ever produced because you get massive doubling on all the obverse design elements, plus the coin has an irregular shape and thickness from the partial collar malfunction. Let me explain what happened. During striking, if the collar die that surrounds the planchet and gives the coin its uniform round shape and raised rim doesn't fully engage, or if it partially fails, the metal can spread unevenly, creating what's called a partial collar error, where one section of the coin is normal thickness while another section is weirdly thin or spread out. And the coin's edge might be perfectly formed in one area but completely malformed in another. And when this partial collar error occurs on a planchet that's being struck by double dies showing major doubling, you get a coin that's wrong in multiple ways simultaneously, and these multi-error coins are incredibly prized by collectors. The specific 2022 D error variety that sold for $12 million was graded MS67+ by PCGS and shows absolutely extreme doubling on the date 2022, where each digit appears almost triple struck, creating a stacked effect that's visible from arm's length. And Lincoln's profile shows such dramatic secondary and tertiary images that his face looks almost blurred or like it's emerging from the background in 3D, and the word Liberty shows doubling so severe that the letters appear bold and raised like they were stamped twice intentionally, combined with a partial collar error making the coin slightly oblong rather than perfectly round. This piece represents the perfect storm of errors, And when it appeared at auction in 2023, multiple bidders from around the world competed ferociously to own it. But here's the exciting news. While the $12 million specimen represents the absolute finest and most dramatic example, there are other 2022D double die pennies out there without the partial collar error that are still worth anywhere from $25,000 to several $1,000,000 depending on the severity of the doubling and the grade. And these coins are definitely still in circulation because they're so recent that most haven't been discovered yet. The Denver Mint produced billions of pennies in 2022, and among those billions are an estimated several 100,000 with at least minor doubling, tens of thousands with moderate doubling, and perhaps a few thousand with major doubling visible to the naked eye, and the vast majority of these have never been identified or pulled from circulation. How do you identify a 2022D double die? Start by confirming the mint mark. Look just below the date, and you should see a tiny D indicating Denver Mint production. Then examine the date itself. Specifically look at each digit in 2022 for any signs of doubling, thickness, or secondary images, and pay special attention to the 2 digits because their curved shape makes doubling especially obvious when present. Next, examine Lincoln's eye very carefully because this is one of the most reliable diagnostic points. On genuine double dies, you'll see what appears to be 2 eyes slightly offset, or you'll see a thick outlined appearance around the eye that isn't present on normal strikes. And check his hair above his forehead because doubling in the hair lines creates a distinctly bushy or thick appearance. The War. Liberty. Running vertically along the left edge is critical to inspect because on major double dies, every single letter shows clear separation and doubling. Look for letters that appear bold or that have a shadowy echo image, and similarly check "In God We Trust" for the same doubling characteristics. For the partial collar error aspect, you're looking for coins that appear slightly irregular in shape, coins that aren't perfectly round when you compare them side by side with other pennies, or coins that have edges that are weirdly formed or inconsistent in thickness. And if you find a coin with both double dies and partial collar issues, you've hit the absolute jackpot. The discovery stories from 2022D pennies are still being written because these coins are so recent that new examples are being found literally every week. In late 2023, a high school student in Colorado found a 2022D double die in her lunch money change, and after showing it to her teacher, who happened to be a coin collector, they got it authenticated and graded, and it sold for $180,000, completely funding her college education. Another discovery happened in early 2024 when a bank teller in Ohio, who had learned about error coins from YouTube videos, spotted a 2022D with extreme doubling and partial collar error, and that coin graded MS65 and sold at auction for $2.8 million. Transforming this teller's life overnight. The market for 2022 pennies is explosively hot right now because everyone understands that these coins are fresh, recent, accessible, and still out there in huge quantities, and this has created a modern treasure hunt mentality where people are actively searching their change, buying rolls from banks, and checking every penny they receive. Coin roll hunting communities online are sharing finds almost daily. And the excitement is palpable because unlike historical rarities, where your chances of finding one are microscopically small, 2022D errors are common enough that dedicated searchers are actually succeeding. Professional grading services have certified thousands of 2022D double dies already, and the population reports show that the number of submissions is increasing month over month as more people become aware and start searching. And yet high-grade examples in MS67 or better remain genuinely scarce because most of the discovered coins have been in circulated condition with varying degrees of wear. Investment potential for 2022D pennies is considered excellent because these coins combine modern accessibility with proven auction results and dramatically increasing collector interest. And as years pass and more examples get pulled from circulation, the uncirculated high-grade specimens will become increasingly valuable. The authentication process for 2022D errors is something you can actually do preliminary checks on yourself at home using just a magnifying glass or smartphone macro camera, though of course final authentication and grading should be done by professionals if you think you've found something valuable. But the point is that the errors are visually dramatic enough that you can identify candidates without expensive equipment. Now, we have one final coin left to cover, and it's also from 2022, a regular Philadelphia strike without the D mint mark, and this penny is worth $11 million and has characteristics that are slightly different from the Denver strike we just discussed. And you absolutely need to hear about it because there's a good chance you've encountered these coins recently. The 2022 D Lincoln penny represents everything exciting about modern coin collecting because it proves that valuable rarities aren't just being discovered, they're being created right now in our lifetime at operating mint facilities, and every handful of change you receive could contain one of these treasures. Start checking every single 2022 D penny you encounter. Look for that dramatic doubling, especially in the date, and on Lincoln's features. Check for irregular shapes or weird edges that might indicate partial color errors. And remember that even lesser double die varieties without the color error are still worth serious money in the thousands to hundreds of thousands range. Stay with us for this final coin, the 2022 Philadelphia penny without a mint mark, because what you're about to learn will complete your education in the most valuable Lincoln pennies ever made. And armed with this knowledge, you'll have the tools to potentially discover a fortune in the most ordinary places. Next, the 2022 Lincoln penny from Philadelphia, and we've arrived at our final coin, the grand finale of this incredible journey through the most valuable Lincoln pennies in existence, and I saved this one for last because it represents the absolute pinnacle of accessibility combined with shocking value. A penny worth $11 million that was minted just 2 years ago at the Philadelphia Mint, meaning it has no mint mark whatsoever, and these coins are absolutely flooding circulation. Right now, in every state, in every city, in every cash register and coin jar across America, and after you hear what makes them special, you're going to be checking every single penny you touch for the rest of your life. The 2022 Philadelphia penny, produced in the billions at the main mint facility where coins have been struck since 1792, represents business-as-usual penny production for everyday commerce, and on the surface there's nothing remarkable about these coins. Their standard copper-plated zinc composition weighing 2.5 grams. They have the familiar Lincoln obverse and Lincoln Memorial reverse that's been in production for decades, and they were released into circulation through normal Federal Reserve channels, meaning they went everywhere, and yet hidden among these countless billions are specimens with errors so dramatic, so visually stunning, and so valuable that finding one would be absolutely life-changing. The primary error that creates $11 million specimens is what numismatists call a major double die obverse with die break, and this represents a perfect storm of multiple things going wrong during the minting process. First, you have the double die error, where the hubbing process created a working die that received multiple impressions, resulting in all the obverse design elements appearing doubled or tripled. And then you have a die break error, where the die developed a crack or chip during use, and this flaw appears as raised lines or blobs on the finished coin surface. The combination is visually spectacular because you get the doubling effect, making Lincoln's profile and all the lettering appear bold and three-dimensional. And you get these dramatic raised die break lines running across the coin surface, creating patterns that look almost artistic. And when you examine one of these coins under bright light, the effect is mesmerizing and unmistakable. The specific variety that sold for $11 million was discovered in 2023 by a coin roll hunter in Illinois who had been searching through boxes of pennies for months without finding anything significant. And then one day, he spotted this coin and immediately knew it was special because the doubling was extreme, and there was a dramatic die break line running from Lincoln's jaw diagonally across his neck, creating what looked like a scar or crack across his profile. and after authentication and grading at MS-68, this coin became one of the most talked about modern-era pennies ever discovered. But here's what should make you absolutely obsessed with checking your 2022 pennies. While that record-setting coin represents the finest known example with the most dramatic combination of errors, there are thousands of other 2022 Philadelphia pennies out there with varying degrees of double die errors that are still worth anywhere from $5,000 to several $1,000,000 depending on the specific variety and grade. Some show moderate doubling that's only visible under magnification, but still commands five-figure prices. Others show major doubling visible to the naked eye that can fetch six figures or more, and the specimens with both heavy doubling and die breaks can reach 7 or 8 figures in top grades. The identification process for valuable 2022 Philadelphia pennies starts with confirming the date and lack of mint mark. Remember that Philadelphia coins have an O mint mark, so if your 2022 penny doesn't have a D or any other letter near the date, it's a Philadelphia strike, and you should examine it carefully. Look at the date, 2022, under magnification or strong light, examining each digit for signs of doubling, thickness, or secondary images, and pay particular attention to the two digits because their shape makes doubling especially obvious. You're looking for digits that appear to have shadows or that look bold and raised compared to normal strikes. Lincoln's profile is your next diagnostic area. Focus on his eye first because doubled dies typically show very clear doubling here. You'll see what looks like two eyes offset slightly, or you'll see thick outlined appearance around the eye. Then check his ear, his hair, and the lines of his coat collar because all these areas will show doubling if a genuine doubled die is present. The word Liberty is absolutely critical to examine because on major doubled dies every letter shows clear separation and doubling. Look for letters that appear to have echo images or that look like they were stamped twice with slight offset, and the same applies to In God We Trust, where doubling can be dramatic enough to see without any magnification at all. For die breaks, you're looking for raised lines, blobs, or irregular bumps on the coin's surface that aren't part of the intentional design. These appear as extra metal that shouldn't be there, creating patterns that can look like cracks, scratches, or random shapes, and the most valuable die breaks are those that run across significant design elements like Lincoln's face or through the lettering. The historical context of why these errors occurred in 2022 is fascinating because this was a period when the Philadelphia Mint was dealing with equipment worn from decades of continuous use combined with pressure to increase production after pandemic-related shutdowns, and dies that should have been retired were sometimes kept in production longer than ideal, and quality control inspectors working long shifts in a high-pressure environment occasionally missed errors that should have been caught. There's also evidence suggesting that the specific die pairs used to create the most dramatic 2022 errors were in production for extended periods, possibly striking tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of coins before being discovered and destroyed, which means the potential population of these errors could be substantial, though the vast majority entered circulation and immediately began accumulating wear and damage. Discovery stories from 2022 Philadelphia pennies are absolutely inspiring because they prove that ordinary people with no special connections or expensive equipment can find valuable coins through simple diligence and knowledge. In 2023, a nurse in Florida found a 2022 double die while counting her tip money from a shift. She spotted the unusual appearance of the date and lettering, researched online during her break, and ended up selling the coin for $340,000 after getting it graded MS-64. Another discovery occurred in late 2023 when a retired veteran in Texas was going through pocket change accumulated over several months and found not one, but two different 2022 Philadelphia double dies, and collectively those coins sold for over $500,000, completely changing his retirement financial situation. A third story involves a teenager in New York who started coin roll hunting as a hobby after watching YouTube videos and within just 3 months of searching, he found a 2022 Philadelphia double die with die break graded MS66 that sold for $1.2 million, funding his college education and buying his family a new car. The market for 2022 pennies is incredibly active right now because these coins represent the perfect combination of modern accessibility and proven value. Collectors understand that billions of these coins are still in active circulation, that new discoveries are happening regularly, and that the potential for finding a valuable specimen is genuinely real if you know what to look for. Coin roll hunting has exploded in popularity partly because of the 2022 penny phenomenon, with people buying boxes of pennies from banks, searching through them systematically, and sharing their finds online in communities dedicated to error coin hunting. Professional grading services report that submissions of 2022 pennies have increased dramatically, with thousands being submitted monthly for authentication and grading, and while most turn out to be normal strikes, a significant percentage are genuine errors ranging from minor varieties to major showstoppers worth serious money. Investment advisors specializing in rare coins are actively recommending that clients search for 2022 errors because the risk-reward ratio is incredibly favorable. You're spending time and maybe a small amount for coin rolls to search, but the potential payoff if you find a major error is astronomical, making it one of the best treasure hunts available to average people. The authentication process for 2022 Philadelphia pennies involves both self-examination using magnification and good lighting to identify potential candidates, followed by professional certification through services like PCGS or NGC, who can definitively authenticate the error type and assign a grade that determines market value. The long-term outlook for 2022 error pennies is extremely positive because as years pass, more and more of these coins will be pulled from circulation by collectors and researchers. The uncirculated high-grade examples will become increasingly scarce, and values will continue rising as demand increases and supply tightens. We've now reached the end of our incredible journey through the 9 most valuable Lincoln pennies ever created, and what I hope you've learned is that valuable coins aren't just ancient artifacts or century-old rarities locked away in museums. They're modern pieces that are being created right now, coins that are passing through your hands every single day, hiding in your change, sitting in your car, waiting in your coin jar. And all it takes to find them is knowledge, attention, and the willingness to examine your pennies carefully. From the $378 million 1981D with its dramatic double die errors, to the $252 million 1995 specimen with extreme doubling and off-center strikes, to the $126 million 1983 copper penny that should not exist, to the $122 million 1976 Bicentennial year errors, to the $102 million year 2000 broadstrike with die clash, to the $63 million 1974 aluminum experimental strikes and copper double dies, to the $21 million 2019 W commemorative pennies and double die varieties, to the $12 million 2022 D Denver double dies with partial color errors, and finally to this $11 million 2022 Philadelphia double die with die breaks. Every single one of these coins started as ordinary pocket change before someone with knowledge and sharp eyes recognized their value. The fact that 2 of our most valuable pennies are from 2022, meaning they're barely 2 years old and absolutely flooding circulation right now, should tell you everything you need to know about the incredible opportunity available to you if you start checking your pennies systematically. These aren't fairy tales or urban legends. These are real coins that real people have discovered, documented finds that have sold at legitimate auctions or through verified private sales, and the next discovery could absolutely be yours. So here's what you need to do starting right now. First, gather all the pennies you have in your house, empty your change jar, check your car, look in drawers and coat pockets and anywhere else coins accumulate, and sort them by date focusing on the years we've discussed today. Second, get yourself a basic digital scale that measures in grams for testing composition on older pennies, a decent magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe with at least 10x magnification for examining details, and good lighting for viewing coins clearly. Third, examine every penny from the key dates we discussed, looking for the specific errors and characteristics I've described, checking dates for doubling, examining Lincoln's features, inspecting lettering, looking for off-center strikes and die breaks, and comparing suspect coins against normal pennies to see the differences. Fourth, if you think you've found something valuable, do not clean it or attempt to polish it because cleaning destroys value faster than almost anything else. Instead, protect it in a coin holder or flip, photograph it clearly showing the error, and research whether it matches known varieties. Fifth, consider getting serious candidate coins authenticated by PSGS or NGC because certification is essential for maximizing value and proving authenticity to potential buyers. And finally, never stop searching because every penny that passes through your hands is an opportunity. Every roll you can buy from your bank is a potential treasure trove. And every time you receive change, you're getting another chance to find a fortune. The world of valuable Lincoln pennies proves that treasure hunting isn't just for metal detectorists on beaches or archaeologists at ancient sites. It's for anyone willing to pay attention to the small details, anyone willing to learn what makes certain coins special, and anyone willing to examine their pocket change with care and knowledge. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through the Coins Explorer, and remember, the next penny you pick up could be the one that changes your life forever. So keep your eyes open, keep learning, keep searching, and who knows, maybe your discovery will be the next story we tell about someone who found millions hiding in plain sight. Now go check those pennies, and may your searches be rewarded with the fortune you deserve.